Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast with Ani and Brian. Join us as we explore the art and science of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools to strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional. Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you'll understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence. If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. We are on episode 43 today. Hey there, Brian.
Hey, Yanni.
I had a really good time last time talking about the point of somatic coaching and change professionals. And I would love to talk more about change. And I was hoping we might be able to do that today.
Well, let's go ahead and change it up.
No, I want to keep it the same.
All right. So today we're going to talk about the one mistake. I mean, there's probably a few mistakes that leaders could make when initiating change initiatives. From our perspective, there's kind of like the one mistake you definitely don't want to make. If you're a leader and you have in mind a change initiative, and let's just say like change is happening all of the time. Different kinds of change can happen, whether there are what we call reactive changes or proactive changes, which we'll talk about a little bit. But there's really one mistake as a leader, I think, that people make that basically makes it really difficult or almost impossible to help a change initiative come to fulfillment.
Well, change initiatives often don't happen. You know, change initiatives are something that are actually like proactive. Usually they might be spurred by something else, but right, we're trying and we're initiating. There's that word, initiative. Right, yeah. We're initiating change. And I don't have the statistics, I never do. But the research that I've been reading, I was reading some things on Gallup recently about how infrequently we can move the needle on change in organizations. And I think it's like the bane of leaders' existence to try to figure out what the magic sauce is to get change initiatives to move through.
You know, and honestly, that's partly because things are always changing. I mean, there was kind of like the pre-COVID world and then the COVID world and now kind of the post-COVID world. I mean, COVID's still in the world, but the pandemic, shut down.
Sure.
So like things have just changed so much in how people approach work and how we think about work and the importance of it. And where is it happening? Is it happening in an office, not in an office? Is it happening hybrid? Are we coming in? So there's always these things that are happening in the environment that are creating how we go about doing business differently and challenging. So now what used to work in terms of change initiatives isn't working anymore. Maybe sometimes it never worked,
Right.
But it's always a moving target.
Well, one of the things we like to talk about with organizations is it's time to redefine words like work and like productivity and stuff. It's time to redefine those things. It's a fantastic time to do that, but it's important that we do, because as we're looking at creating initiatives, we are no longer in the world that we were in 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20, 30, whatever years ago. And if we think that we can create initiatives based on, not redefining those foundational terms, it's gonna fail. It's not gonna work, because we actually do at this time in history need to define those foundational words and terms and concepts that we can't take for granted anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just talk about maybe whether it's organizational change or personal change. Change kind of happens in two basic ways to start with. It's either reactive change or proactive change. In a lot of ways, reactive change gets initiated more quickly. What's reactive change? Oh my God, there's a pandemic. What are we going to do about it? That's reactive change. And oh my God, the stock market just crashed. What are we going to do about it? There's been a tornado, there's been a hurricane. That's reactive change.
I think it's interesting to look at how quickly some things did change with COVID, and people were going, oh my gosh, that change would have taken 6 years, but
Yep.
it took 6 months. Wow. But there's something to it, like you're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of urgency with reactive change. And so here's the thing with reactive change. That urgency comes along with a lot of energy to create the change.
Yeah.
So in our personal lives, it's kind of like, oh my God, I was in a car accident, right? Or I wasn't in a car accident, but let's say someone was in a car accident. I've got to change a whole bunch of stuff now. That's reactive change. And we can oftentimes put a lot of energy behind that change. Or someone gets a diagnosis, a health diagnosis that creates a lot of need for change. Maybe we have a child. Boy, that's a lot of change all at once, right? And it's a reactive kind of situation. So reactive changes, stuff can change very quickly. There's a lot of energy behind the change, at least initially. Now, oftentimes the problem with reactive change is that initial energy explosion just really can go off a cliff. And certainly, in healthcare around the pandemic, that's absolutely what we saw. If some of the statistics when COVID first came was that worker engagement went from this paltry something like 40% all the way up to like 70 to 80% engagement of healthcare workers. Everyone's on board. We're all rowing in the same direction. Like everyone's on the same team. Like, let's get this done. And then it just kept going and going and going and going. And then a year, 2 years, 3 years later, a massive burnout cliff happened. Just because that level of energy is just not sustainable. And after we kind of got out of the woods, out of the really dangerous woods, there was no more reactive change initiating or pushing that along. So that whole urgency bit went away, and the people's energy levels just fell off a cliff, and created a lot of health issues for the people in healthcare that were mental and physical health issues for people that were supporting people that were sick.
And the urgency is really related to survival. And so we're not really using our full capacities for creativity because we're trying to make sure that we survive. That urgency is around survival energy. And it can lead to burnout and all those things. It's because it's not the creative energy would be more of like this rejuvenating kind of energy that we would love to see. So I'm saying that too, because sometimes we think, oh, well, we should be in a place where we can either have or treat things like reactive change more often then, so we can stimulate that energy to get people going. I've seen that happen, and that is dangerous.
Yeah, that's dangerous. Yeah, because then we have this moving away from energy. And actually, probably a whole other podcast issue around the motivation pyramid, which we're not going to talk about today, but the different ways that our subconscious functions around motivation. I'll make a note. We'll talk about that some other time. But you're 100% right, Ani. Like, artificially trying to use reactive change can really backfire a lot. So then that brings us to proactive change. Okay, so proactive change is where most of us think about with change initiatives.
And it sounds good, but there's often no energy behind it, and
I work with leaders in leadership positions that are actively trying to help their organizations change. And it's really a fascinating experience because every individual has a different threshold for proactive change. Now, I have to admit, like me personally, I'm pretty good at proactive change now, but I believe that's because
of me.
Well, it's because of you, absolutely. But it's also because I've been hit with enough 2x4s in my past because I waited too long to change something that I never want to have that experience again. So most people, like they just wait too long to change something. Think about way back in college, right? Like you take your exams and you bomb them and you're like, well, I guess I should have studied after I got like a 1.0 GPA for this semester. And like, no, not me.
Okay.
But you can imagine like, people, and now my scholarship is threatened and all that kind of stuff. I should have done something. And then you change as you go along. But most people, 2x4s, you get hit with enough of them and you're like, listen, I don't want that to happen again. I'm going to plan farther and farther ahead. But
It's like health challenges.
Yeah, it's health challenges.
Health challenges
Yep.
are often the 2x4 that I needed to change my diet or to get more regular with my exercise or whatever it is. Or even I've recently working with some couples who like partner couples.
Mhm.
Um, I
You mean
mean,
like work partner?
yeah, I mean, in business
Okay.
and life. Sorry, was not clear. And the threshold for change oftentimes brings up a lot of conflict because we're changing the subconscious mind and stuff. And it can just be so challenging to have the energy to move through those things with all the increased conflict.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So a lot
so
of
it brings
people
up
wait.
stuff that they weren't addressing.
We're
initially.
addressing,
Yeah.
and that's why we're not starting it. Maybe on some level we know subconsciously it's going to bring up a lot of
Which I think
stuff.
it's really interesting as we're talking about change initiatives, because that happens is the things that we weren't addressing when we initiate change do come up to be addressed. And in order to really move forward in a way that is sustainable and is on a new level of vibrational frequency and actually does create actual change, we do need to address the things that are coming up.
Yeah. So certainly in change initiatives, if you have teams that are pretty change friendly, which is actually one of the cool things we measure with the motivational mapping profile. So when we do motivational maps with organizations, individuals, and teams, we can identify what teams are going to be more change friendly than other teams are to help move. Just people are sometimes they're like, hey, I can see there's a problem coming way down the road. We better do something about it now. And there's other people that are like, we're not going to change it until there's a massive catastrophe. So you think about things like climate change. Now, whether you agree on or don't agree on why climate change is happening, whether it's man-made or not man-made, I think we can all agree that climate change is real and it's causing some catastrophic damages globally. And we still, as a country, as a global organization,
Species.
are like still stymied about what to do about it. And we're just not putting those, even the science has been around for a long time. And now the science is at the point where like, listen, people, it's almost too late at this point. We're going to meet these thresholds of warming and we're going to keep having these massive problems. And why didn't we do something about this 20 years ago with that long vision? It's because humans, again, resist change. 2x4s. We need a 2x4, and maybe we need some more hurricanes, more 2x4s. Healthcare is the same thing. I work with a nonprofit in our northern friends in Canada. And one of the initiatives we work with is helping to rehumanize healthcare, and different healthcare systems in Canada than in the US. But when you meet with doctors and surgeons and caseworkers that work in Canada, the problems are very much the same around the healthcare has been numberized. We're numbers, and it's all about economics, really. There's not a lot of human-centric stuff that happens in healthcare. I can kind of just keep going on about that. But we've known this for a long time. The pandemic just revealed all of that stuff, and still, we're not changing it. It's still not changing. We're still not doing something about it. So you can see when you have individuals oftentimes can move through these change processes a little bit faster, but when you start having collective organizations, now you have to realize there's individuals that are both change friendly and have less change friendly kind of approaches within that group, which can really slow down and stymie proactive change initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's the one mistake leaders make, Brian?
Well, so let's kind of look at, when we look at change initiatives, like what makes a successful change initiative. There's books about this, and there's podcasts on this, and there's articles about this, and all these sorts of things. I think if we break it down to kind of two basic things, just to make it really simple and take it from there, a lot of the Gartner research has kind of broke it down to kind of two things. Number one, are we prioritizing change? Like, what in an organizational setting with change initiatives, what changes are the most important ones to make first?
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Well, yeah,
right?
it does.
It makes sense to do that. And
that I think that oftentimes doesn't get prioritized really awesome, though. I mean, when we work with organizations, people think that the change they need to make first is this one, and we very clearly see if they look a little deeper, if they make a different kind of change first, then whole number of things change based on that kind of core change. oftentimes organizations are not looking at the core change. They're looking at superficial issues that are still going to keep having problems with.
Sure, that seemed like that would just be quick hitters or easy to do.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting about this step one of prioritizing change, and by the way, I don't think the top mistake is not prioritizing change, by the way, prioritizing which changes need to be done.
Yeah, sure.
But I also want to point out, but the whole act of prioritizing change is a very frontal lobe dominant activity.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
It's a very thinking brain activity, very frontal lobe, high cortical centers, what we call executive functioning, to kind of put all the changes on the table and go, okay, what ones need to happen kind of first, and putting them all in their place, sort of thing. So if that doesn't happen, I think that that's a problem, but I don't think it's the number one mistake. I think that the number one mistake that leaders make, is they don't address how much energy it's going to take to do the change.
Well, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Change does require energy.
It requires energy, so much energy.
Requires so much energy. One of the examples I use with clients and leaders is that because we're changing, the subconscious is like trying to turn a cruise ship around with like a paddle sometimes. And like it requires a tremendous amount of energy to move that cruise ship in a different direction. Yeah, that's a big deal. And then what happens is folks don't have enough energy for the change, and we start blaming them or blaming us. There's got to be some answer, and then we start trying to figure out or blame, like it's the people, it's the system, like whatever it is, but it's really comes down to energy.
Comes down to energy. And again, we are at the Somatic Coaching Academy, and so maybe our purview on why we think this is the most important mistake that people make is because we're looking at this from a metabolic perspective, and a neurological perspective too.
So we actually expect a very, very high percentage of success for change, because that's what we've seen and that's our expectation. Whereas it's been my experience that with individuals and with organizations, a lot of people actually expect I would be comparing poor results. Like they don't actually expect 100%, or they don't expect 90%. They don't expect success. So the expectations are actually pretty low a lot of the time, which actually accounts for the fact that nobody factored in the fact that it's going to take a lot of energy, rather than addressing the energy.
Correct.
And then you can actually have higher expectations for success.
Correct. Let's just look at the brain for a moment. I don't care what you're doing as an individual. If you wanted to try to change something or learn to do something new, brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, something as simple as that is going to feel clunky and weird, and your arm will get tired, and you won't get all the teeth. And then after a while, it'll be easier. You'll get all your teeth. And while you're doing that, your brain is wiring new connections while you're doing that, while and after you're doing that brushing, literally creating new pathways. I think about it if you were, if I wanted to go from point A to point B, and to get across, and let's say there was a jungle between point A and point B, but there was like one little path that I could take. Most people would just take the path that already exists between point A and point B in the jungle. Now, learning to brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand or a change initiative is like using a machete to hack through the same jungle, even when there's a pathway that already exists just a few hundred yards away. That's the kind of energy it takes to create, because you're creating a new pathway in your brain.
I'm laughing because we live in the Adirondack Mountains in New York, and one of my least favorite activities is called bushwhacking. Bushwhacking is when you just decide to go walk up a mountain, but there is no path. And it's terrible because my legs get all scraped up and I'm going to get poison ivy, and like it sucks. But that's bushwhacking.
That's a change initiative, though. That's what it's like to do a change initiative.
I'm going to carve out a path on this mountain. You know what else it reminds me of is how much energy we have. Teenagers, and our youngest is learning how to drive right now, and it's interesting to me how exhausting it is
for you.
Yes, both. Touche. Yeah, he gets tired. Like we just went on a road trip and I didn't expect him to be able to do a 3-hour trip. And why didn't I? Because I knew he wouldn't have the energy for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was hoping that he'd be maybe able to do like an hour or something. And half an hour in, he was saying, I'm tired. And I get it because it's so much energy to pay attention to all of this stuff because it's new. Whereas for me, I can do the 3-hour trip because I've got all those pathways already carved out.
They're already carved out.
I'm not bushwhacking,
Correct.
how to drive a car.
And so when we're initiating change in an organization, so this goes back to why it is important to prioritize change, because doing more than one change initiative at a time is really exhausting. It's almost like learning how to brush your teeth with your left hand while you're riding a unicycle and juggling at the same time, right? It's just there's so much stuff in your nervous system to try to pull together. And you've got multiple people associated with it also, which creates inner resistance within itself. So, the question when we talk about if this is the biggest mistake that leaders are potentially making, is are you really consciously and realistically addressing how much energy it will take to make the change? And in my estimation, most people underestimate drastically how much energy it takes to make the change.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are you taking off the person's plate, the person's or people's plate who is driving or a part of the change initiative?
Mhm.
Most organizational leaders
Putting more on.
they just put more on, right? They're like, oh yeah, and by the way, like
Now there's
do this whole new thing on top of all of the stuff that you're already doing. That is doomed to failure. You have to be very, very conscious about what are you taking off the person's plate, not only because of a bandwidth perspective, but just a nervous system bandwidth perspective. They are learning to do something different. They are engaging other people in doing something different requires more energy. It's just all around is going to take more energy. So you have to decide, number one, what are you taking off the person's plate?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would consider is, what are you doing? You mentioned this a little earlier in the podcast. What are you doing to help proactively renew the person's energy?
Yeah, I was going to say that. So when we, go and work with organizations who are making change initiatives, one of the things we do is we help people to develop simple, easy somatic practice routines so that they can renew their energy. And we find without a doubt that it's the people who aren't doing those things regularly that don't have the sustainable energy to move forward. But the people who do those things regularly are like, wow, I feel so great. And they have the energy to be able to move forward.
And there's certain things that we do that will drive energy renewal faster than other things. Like Ani kind of mentioned, we call them core centering bites. So what little core centering things can you have people do during the day to increase their energy? What kind of social engagements can you create for people to renew their energy? Again, depending on how the change initiative works. Sometimes if it's if it's a lot of people working together in the change initiative, then it might be, well, do people have enough alone time to take a walk or something by themselves with no, turn off the phone, there's no messages, anything like that, in order to renew their energy? So you have to be a little bit mindful about maybe, does the person tend to recharge better around people or not around people?
That's
those sorts of things.
And we're all social beings. So I'm super introverted. And even during change initiatives, I need that time to renew on my own. But I also need, like you were saying, that social renewal with the people who are changing with me.
Yeah.
That's super important.
Can I give you just a little funny inside tip on a little renewal thing that I do?
Sure.
So when we're kind of changing a lot of things and putting things together, and I'm starting to feel okay, my brain has wired enough for now. For me, it's flipping on just a quick half a Seinfeld episode or something, just to laugh. So for me, laughing is a great way to reactivate my nervous system in a different way to help me integrate that information. But I also get it from the desk. I'll go out and walk around in the woods a little bit and come back. But We know that those integrative renewal periods actually drive the change faster and more sustainably too. So what are you doing proactively along those lines? That's really important, really, really important to consider.
You know, our daughter's in college and she's studying global management, and she was recently the CEO of her company in a management class. And I don't know if I told you this or not, but her head of HR scheduled out throughout the semester 3 comedy movie nights for the company. And as I was talking with Charlotte about it, it was really fun to see how he just did it because he's kind of a fun-loving guy and he thought it was a good way to get the company together and stuff. But I thought it was so genius to be able to renew together, having that social engagement together. And she was commenting that after those movie nights, their company was so much more engaged and charged up and ready to go. And the amount of energy that these kids needed to take to be able to get their company to the finish line, not just on their project, but it was a class. So they were learning about management and how to do all of the different positions and everything, and trying to actually create something as a company. Like, it required a tremendous amount of energy. I thought that head of HR, it didn't sound like he kind of knew why
what he was doing, but it was a very organic thing to do.
Really smart.
So, okay. So we'll give you some ideas as a leader, like how you can kind of really think about this. So be a little more realistic about how much energy it's going to take. It's going to take more than what you think it's going to take, almost always. What are you doing proactively around creating renewal moments for your teams and your employees and your people during that change initiative? There's one more little note or little kind of suggestion that probably won't be new for a lot of people, but how involved are all of the stakeholders with the initiative? Like, are their voices heard and important? Are the people who are a part of the initiative, do they know that their voices matter? Now, we don't always have to take into everyone's account or implement everyone's opinion, because that's different. But the thing is if people know that they have a voice in it, and they know that the change that they're doing is meaningful for not just for the company, but for themselves also, that is also a way to conserve energy.
Meaning.
Right? Got to conserve energy, because if people like uncertainty, just like uncertainty is a great thing, by the way. I think we really have to learn how to adopt more and engage more uncertainty for sure, especially around creating change initiatives and those sorts of things. However, if you are the leader with uncertainty, you still have a vision and you have a skin in the game around where you're going. If your team doesn't understand or don't have a part of that vision, then the uncertainty feels like just walking around in the dark. Like there's no reference points. Like, why are we doing this? I don't understand. I don't understand the context. And that just burns a tremendous amount of energy. So while you're trying to renew someone's energy, if you're spending it even faster because there's too much uncertainty, a person does not feel valued in the engagement, they don't feel like they're really a part of it. Like, those are great ways to start plugging some of those energy leaks for employees as well. So to have more of a kind of more of a holistic engagement around change rather than top down. We know that, again, this is more Gartner research, that top down change models, while still like over, I don't remember the number exactly. For some reason, the number 58% is in my head. This may not be accurate at all, but still a large number of organizations are still using top-down change models. And the amount of change fatigue that's happening in the workplace is rising correlatively. And so a big kind of understanding and push now is that it's so important to have everyone who's a part of the change experience to have a voice in that experience and understand the context of it. So as a leader, spending more time doing that, not just, hey, this is what I'm telling you to do, just do it. Like, you might feel like that's the most efficient way to do it, but that's going to end up on the back end causing big problems and possibly change fatigue and change resistance, ending up in the change initiative failing. Kind of how we started our conversation today.
I was smiling to myself thinking about how you were saying top down, meaning like leader down. But it's funny because we're at the Somatic Coaching Academy talking about looking at doing things from the bottom up, and doing things in your organization from the bottom up are important too. Change is possible. Change is possible. The creative, awesome, amazing changes that you envision for your organizations, for your teams are possible. And holding those expectations and also celebrating the milestones and knowing that things are possible is really important too. Having the faith that the changes are possible and that your people are the right people and that you're the right person to help to carry that mission forward helps you to put faith in front of fear, which both require us to believe in something invisible. So you might as well believe in the invisible faith over the fear that can really consume change initiative. So, we believe in you. We have faith in you. You can do it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. This is a really fun conversation, Brian. And I love talking about how people who are looking at not only helping themselves change, but creating change for those that they serve. It's really exciting to me to see the possibility for ripples upon ripples upon ripples in the world.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us here today, and let us know what you think. And we look forward to seeing you on our podcast again next week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself. Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.